All right, so we'll go over all the kind of key points here for the Unit 2 exam, and then I'll give you the details on the exam as well. And then I posted the exam review package this morning, so you guys can check that out on Google Classroom as well. Okay, so first thing we went over in this unit was cell theory. Okay, so there's only 4 names to know. Know them, they'll be in the multiple choice, okay, for sure, on this exam. So what did Hooke do?
He made the first microscope that saw cells through a cork.
Right, he saw this, he was the person who discovered cells, okay, looking at cork, right, so that was his contribution, okay, we knew cells existed after that, okay, and then who came after him? Sounds like Hooke, but longer. Leeuwenhoek, okay, Leeuwenhoek was the first person to view living cells, okay, and then came Schleiden and Schwann after that, okay, so they were the ones who came up with the original cell theory. Okay, and they discovered that yes, in fact, cells are common to all living things. All right, should you know the points of the cell theory? Definitely, okay, because it's an easy multiple choice question. Which of the following is not part of the cell theory, since there are 3 points to the cell theory and 4 points in a multiple choice question. The most important point of the 3 points is the second point, okay? That cells carry out the basic functions of the organism. It is something we have talked about on several occasions throughout this unit because it relates to what the parts of the cell do, it relates to cell transport, okay? All of that stuff. It is probably something that you could work into probably a third of your written response answers. Okay? You could probably find a way to work it into those. All right, so cells carry out the basic functions of the organism. Transport is a basic function. Growth is a basic function. Okay, all of those kinds of things. All right, so that's what you need to know, okay, or be able to do with the stuff on cell theory. Then we talked about microscopy. Okay, and I am going to ask you to estimate the size of an organism as viewed through the microscope. That'll be likely a multiple choice item. And the way that I will ask that is just as you see here. Okay? I will have a picture and I'll put a circle around it. Okay? And I'll say, the circle represents the field of view on the high power lens. Estimate the size of the specimen, A, B, C, or D. All right? So if we were looking at this and we were saying that it was on high power that has a field of view of 400 micrometers, what would be a reasonable size estimation for that object? Like if it was multiple choice, which one of these would you pick? Which one would be the most reasonable estimation? Does it take up the entire field of view? Then it's not 400. It definitely takes up more than a quarter and definitely more than half. So that would eliminate 200 and 150. The only reasonable answer there is 300. Okay, is it exactly 300? Probably not, but it's an estimation. That's the only reasonable estimation for that one. Okay, so you'll definitely be asked to do that. And you'll be asked probably a couple multiple choice questions just about the use of the microscope, like which lens do you start on, okay? You know, what's the procedure for before you move up to the next magnification, you center it, you focus it, okay? things like that. Just basic use of the microscope kind of things in the multiple choice. Okay. Okay, and then we talked about the modes of nutrition, okay, and the two modes of nutrition, chemoheterotrophs and photoautotrophs. Should you know those two words? Definitely. Not only will they be in the multiple choice, but I would say there's a good chance that you could find a way to work in those words into a written response answer as well. Now, the whole point of that lesson was that we were trying to show that cells have a lot of similarities, but any differences they have are related to their modes of nutrition. That's why plant cells and animal cells look different. Okay? They look a lot alike, but there are some noticeable differences, and all of those differences are because plants are photoautotrophs, carry out photosynthesis, and make their own food. And animals are chemoheterotrophs, which means they have to consume other organisms or organic material and use it for food. Okay? Because of that, their cells have different specialized structures to do that. Okay? There's definitely going to be some multiple choice about that, and again, probably ways to work that into a written response item as well. Okay, so cell structure and how it relates to modes of nutrition. Okay? Definitely going to be on there. Okay, cell structure. You're going to have to label a cell. Okay, you're not going to have to do all 13 parts of it like we have on the quizzes, but since you don't know what 5 or 6 things I'm going to pick, you are going to have to know them all. So I will have a diagram of a cell on there, and you will have to name and give the function of the requested structures. There will be 6. I will pick 6 out of the 13. Okay, there's also likely to be some questions that ask you about the importance of compartmentalization. Okay, that's that whole idea of each organelle inside the cell has its own compartment, its own conditions, which allows the cell to carry out functions that are not compatible with each other in separate areas. Okay. Okay, and then cell transport. What are the big 3 methods of cell transport?
Osmosis.
Osmosis,
Diffusion.
diffusion, active transport. Okay, those are the big 3. There will be at least one written response question on each. At least. Okay, that means they're all definitely in there. Okay. Here's how they're going to be tested. I'm going to give you a application kind of question. So here's a situation a cell finds itself in. Okay. What cell transport process would be most important here? Describe how it would work in this situation. Okay, so if I said something like, I put a cell in distilled water, describe what cell transport process would happen and how that would work. Okay, if I put a cell in distilled water, are there any salts outside of the cell? Are there salts inside the cell? What's going to happen? There's a difference in salt concentration inside and out. Which cell transport process is responsible for that? Osmosis is the passive movement of water across a membrane to balance salt concentrations. In this situation, there are no salts outside of the cell, so the water will rush into the cell until it bursts. Okay? Did you tell me which cell transport process it was? Yes, you said osmosis. Did you describe what osmosis is? Yes, good. Did you say how it might work in that situation? Yes, you did. Okay, did you tell me what would happen to the cell? Yes, you did. That's what you have to do. Okay, if you just say osmosis, cell will pop, that's 2 marks. Okay, because you didn't explain how or why. Okay, so on this exam, and you might want to write this down, on this exam, level of detail is crucial. If you're telling me about osmosis when you're answering a question, tell me everything you know about osmosis. Okay? Leave no detail out. Okay? Because that's what often happens to people on this test. They know way more than they write down. But I can't give you marks for it if it isn't on the paper. Okay? So the difference between osmosis, the cell will pop, and what I said previous to that is 3 marks. Okay? Put everything down. All right, so for cell transport, okay, we said diffusion. Okay, diffusion is how things move within the cell or through the cytoplasm. Right? They move from high concentration to low concentration. It's not targeted. It's slow over long distances, okay, but it's free. Right? Those are kind of the things. And of course, we know that because it is slow and not targeted, if a cell gets too big, diffusion will cease to be effective. Right? Osmosis, like we said, it's the passive movement of water only. Okay, is that how you can tell? If the question that talks about salts or water, it's talking about osmosis. Okay, so osmosis, passive movement of water across a membrane to balance salt concentrations. Okay, so that's how that one works. And then we've got active transport. Okay, remember that active transport is the only one of the big 3 that uses energy. It also goes the other way. It's the one thing that pumps material from areas of low concentration to areas of high concentration. Okay, that's why it needs to use energy. Okay, the other ones happen on their own. Right? The big thing about active transport is you need to explain to me how the carrier or transport proteins in the membrane work. And we talked about that in class, that when the energy is used, it changes the shape of those proteins, which act like a pump, okay, that pushes the material, okay, from the area of low concentration to high concentration. The part that people usually leave out when they talk about active transport is the membrane proteins, those carrier proteins. They talk about energy, they talk about going from low to high, they remember all that stuff, but they forget to talk about the proteins that make it happen. Okay, when we also talked about cell transport, we talked about endocytosis and exocytosis. So we talked about phagocytosis, cell eating, okay, when it engulfs a piece of food and brings it in. Endocytosis, when it engulfs fluid. Pinocytosis, when it engulfs fluid. Okay, and receptor mediated, when it engulfs hormones. Okay, those are going to be on there, multiple choice only. Okay, so don't mention them in any of your written response answers. Okay, they don't fit there. Okay, they're only going to be tested in the multiple choice. These ones, though, these big 3, definitely written. Okay, then we talked about multicellularity. Okay, and if something is multicellular, it must have specialization. What does specialization mean?
Each cell carries out like its own specific job and does it best itself.
Right. Okay. The organism organism is going to have some cells that do this job. They're going to be slightly different in structure in order to do that job very well. And then the cells over here, they look a little bit different because they're specialized to do a different job. Okay? Can they all do all the jobs? Probably, but they're really good at one. Okay? And as a result, they can work together. Okay? There's an interdependence there on each other. Okay? And that's the key part of being multicellular, is having specialization. What was our example of specialization? We looked at it in the cell anatomy lab, and we looked at it in 2 other lessons, the one on multicellularity and the one on plant structure.
Is it the leaf cell?
Right, the layers of the leaf. Okay? Definitely go over the layers of the leaf. Know what each part does. That's your example of specialization in a multicellular organism for Science 10. Okay, so talk about how the epidermis secretes the cuticle, how the palisade layer is carrying out photosynthesis, how the spongy layer is responsible for the exchange of gases, okay? How the stomates are made up of guard cells and their shape can change to open and close, okay? So that water can evaporate or not, okay? All those things, those are all important. Here's this cell, it's doing this job, it's specialized for this, okay? I guarantee you there's a question on there that's a picture of the leaf, okay? And its layers, and you're gonna have to do exactly that. Okay, and advantages of being multicellular. Okay, the main advantage is that cube lab we did. Okay, if you are multicellular, you overcome the problem faced by large single-celled organisms. That is, you have a good surface area to volume ratio, which means diffusion works efficiently within each and every one of your small cells. Okay, if you get as a single cell too large, diffusion does not work. There's always a question about that as well. Okay, and examples of specialization in plants. So I kind of did that already. Okay, that's the layers of the leaf. Okay, so make sure we know that. And then transport in plants. So we're not totally finished transport in plants. I've gone over all the information you need, so the xylem, the phloem, okay, all that kind of stuff, but we haven't done the lab on it yet. That's what we're going to do the first day back after Easter. Okay, so just as a quick review, for water to move up the plant, what cellular transport process is responsible? Osmosis. When water evaporates from the spongy layer, the salts that were dissolved in it get left behind. Okay? Water naturally moves in the xylem up the tree towards that salt. Okay? Because it's osmosis, it's passive, the plant can't stop it. Okay? It naturally moves towards the salt. Okay? Because water is a polar molecule, all the water molecules are hydrogen bonded to each other. That would be cohesion. And hydrogen bonded to the inside of the xylem, that would be adhesion. Okay? And that allows the plant to bring the water up from the roots without using any energy. Okay? That is definitely going to be something you're going to have to explain. All right? And we're going to do a lab that first day back that will prove that that is where the force comes from. Okay? Because we're going to take a plant, we're going to cut the roots off, and it's still going to be able to transport water. Spoiler alert. Okay? Even though it doesn't have its roots, which means the only place where that force that lifts the water can come from then is the leaf. It's not being pumped from the roots. Okay? They're gone and it'll still move the water. Okay, so definitely be able to explain in detail. There's that word again, level of detail. Okay? Did I use all the terms in my description? I used osmosis. Okay? I used spongy layer. I used hydrogen bonding, polar molecule, adhesion, cohesion. Okay? I used all the terms. That's level of detail. That answer is a lot different than this one. Water moves because salts are there, and it sticks to the inside of the xylem. Okay? While that's fundamentally true, it's not nearly as good of an answer as one that uses all the correct terminology, explains it in more detail. Okay? All right, there's going to be some application questions to do with that. It's not just going to be regurgitated, it's going to be, a plant is in this situation. How could that affect its ability to transport material? Okay, and then you can go into, okay, well, plants transport material like this, and in this situation, that would work better or worse, and here's why. Okay, there's a lot of that kind of application stuff, especially with plants on the unit exam. All right, then we talked about the parts of the plant. Phloem and xylem, definitely got to know those because they're part of plant transport. So the xylem, middle of the stem, transports the water. Phloem, outside of the stem, transports the sugar. Okay, now we just finished talking about what forces were involved in moving the water. That was osmosis, polar nature of water, hydrogen bonds, all of that. Okay, what force do we use to move sugar from the leaves to the roots? Gravity. Gravity, simple, right? It'll do it on its own. Don't have to use any energy, just let gravity pull it. Okay. All right, so definitely be able to explain that. Here's a 6-mark question that asks you about what the xylem and phloem do in the written response. Okay, so where, what, okay, what forces, okay, all the stuff we've already talked about. All right, plant growth, development, and adaptation. We talked about that the other day. That was the plant hormones. Okay, so there'll be some multiple choice questions about those. But there could also be some questions in the written that have pictures. Okay. And again, it'll be here's a picture of a plant. Here's what happened to this plant. Why does the plant now look like this? Right? And you can talk about tropisms, how tropisms happen, what hormones might be involved in making those tropisms happen. Okay, or maybe it's a picture of, like a time-lapse thing of a banana that's going from green to brown. And you could explain to me that ethylene would cause that banana to ripen, and things like that. It's going to be application kinds of questions. Okay. All right, for a plant to do any tropism, that is, curve its stem, what has to happen? Okay, that could be one of the causes. That could be like thigmotropism or geotropism after the fact. But how does it, if the plant is now reoriented, it needs to get back to this. How does it, what does it do to make that curve? How does the plant make itself grow like that?
It grows towards the food or the sun.
Okay, so it's going to grow in response to the stimulus. Okay, but how does it make itself curve?
The cells on the outside grow at a more rapid pace than the ones on the inside.
Okay, so cells on either side grow at different rates. Okay, the ones that are on the outside grow faster. What hormone is responsible for that? What hormone makes cells get longer? Auxins. Okay, so there's another prime example of difference in answers, right? I show you a picture of a plant that's got a big curve in it, okay, and I ask what tropism was responsible for this and how did it work? Okay, if you say the plant wasn't getting enough light, so phototropism, and it grew towards the light, that's 2 marks out of 5. Okay, if you say plant is growing towards the light using phototropism. This is accomplished by having cells on one side grow faster than the other. Auxins are responsible for this because auxins make plants get longer. Plant cells get longer. Now you got a 5-mark answer. Okay? There's quite a bit more detail in the second answer, would you agree? Okay? Now, this is the frustrating part of this exam for me when I mark it. Okay? Because I read that 2-mark answer and I know the person knew more than that and they just didn't write it down. Okay? Now, if you think it's frustrating for me, imagine how frustrating it'll be for you when you get your answer back and go, oh, I had just written that down, and then I'll say, I told you so. Okay? So I'm telling you now, make sure you write all those little details down because they're all important. Okay? All right, so hormones, tropisms, how do they adapt to the environment? Okay, like I showed you those pictures of the trees after the flood that Reese had mentioned there. Okay, so yeah, after the flood, they all started to grow back up. That was because of probably geotropism. Okay, but you might be able to make an argument for phototropism. But the picture that I'll use on the exam, you'll know. It'll be one or the other. Okay. Okay, and then factors affecting plant growth. That's what we learned yesterday. Okay, so you got your abiotic factors, you got your biotic factors, water, temperature, okay, carbon dioxide, wind, periodic disturbances, okay, light. I think I forgot to mention that one. Okay, so there could be some multiple choice questions about that, and probably an opportunity to work that into 1 or 2 plant questions in the written response as well. Okay, and then we've already kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but there is going to specifically be a couple multiple choice and 1 written response item about cell size, surface area to volume ratio, and diffusion. Okay, and it's usually a question with a cell in a slightly ridiculous situation. Okay, something that would, upon first look, you would immediately go, that makes no sense, and it would be easy to explain why the surface area to volume ratio would be the reason it makes no sense. Okay. Okay, so why can't cells get big? Okay, that's what we're looking at here. And we are looking at 26 multiple choice questions and 9 written response. Okay, so in the multiple choice, we got questions about the microscope. We got questions about modes of nutrition and cell structure, cell transport, cell structure and function, cell structure and function, cell structure and function, cell structure and function. This is basically what does this organelle do. If I say cell structure and function, it's like what does this organelle do kind of thing. Okay. Plant transport, plant structure, plant growth and development, compartmentalization, important people, important people. There's 2 questions about people. Difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Cell structure and function. Plant structure and transport. structure and transport, plant transport, plant growth and development, plant growth and development, plant growth and development, plant growth and development, modes of nutrition, multicellularity, plant structure and transport, microscopy. Was there a lot of plant structure and transport in there? Okay, plant growth and development, and cell structure and transport. Those were the big things, okay, in the multiple choice. Okay, in the written response, 9 questions, 50 marks. Okay, 5-0. So the whole test is out of 76, which is 12 marks less. No, 10 marks less than your chem exam. Okay. All right, so in the written response, how stomates work. Okay, so that's kind of like specialization, but definitely know how the stomates work. And then we've got plant growth and development. And so that's tropisms, hormones, things like that. Okay, and then labeling the cell. Layers of the leaf. Plant transport. Cell transport. Cell transport. And cell size, surface area, and transport. Wait. Oh, there's only 8. Oh, that's right, I changed that. Okay, there's only 8 written response questions. And it's 49 marks, not 50. Okay, so that gives you a pretty good idea what's going to be on there, what kind of things to study. And as we said, it's 8 written response items, not 9. Okay, all right, in Google Classroom this morning, yes, it's me. You should find the review package. Okay, so it says old exam questions, and then the other one is the key. All right, so if you open that up, it's not just old exam questions, okay? There's also kind of a summary here, the major concepts, the minor concepts, some example questions. These are not old exam questions, these are just try these. This is a good review activity for you to do, okay? So that would be all this stuff here, you know, explaining the hormones. So those are things to do to study, okay? And then after that is a practice test. Okay, so some multiple choice questions. Whoa. Okay. Weird. Okay, so some multiple choice questions, and you can see, and then written response item. Okay, this is size estimation. Okay. You can see there, it's an example of one that would be about like tropisms and stuff. So that tree got knocked over by a large truck when it was little, and now it's growing straight up and down again. Okay, you could explain to me why, right? That's how I'm gonna ask those kinds of questions. So it gives you a pretty good idea what you're gonna see. There's lots of pictures. Okay, more on your exam than are even on the practice test. There's more pictures. Okay. So yeah, just kind of be ready for those, okay? If I give you a picture, know that it's really important for helping you to answer the question, okay? Yeah, so those are the things that you can work on to help you study for it. Okay, questions from you guys? Anything you'd like me to go over in a bit more detail or review a little bit? Then you got some time to work on that review package. Hey, if questions come up, just let me know, guys.